Hey everyone, welcome to Broadband Deployment News. The state of New York recently announced that they have submitted a challenge to the FCC of a little over 31,000 broadband serviceable locations that they say were not in the broadband data fabric. So how big a number is that, and how did they come up with that? We'll talk about that in just a second. Be right back. Thanks for joining me. Rick Usey here with Broadband Deployment News. So I saw this story come up back around the end of October, and so I want to look at the story. Also, it mentions New York's map, which is how they got a lot of this data, or how they kind of compared things with the broadband fabric. So I want to talk through this a little bit, and then also show, I've showed it before, because it's a good map, show the New York map and look at a couple of areas on there, just to kind of, again, give you a little background on this and kind of fill out the story here. So you can see here, Governor Hochul issues New York State challenge to FCC broadband data. New York's Connect All program submitted more than 31,000 missing unserved and underserved address locations. So unserved, so this is all related to the BEAD program, or the Infrastructure Act, where unserved means a location that's less than 25 by 3, 25 megabits per second down and 3 megabits per second up, and then underserved would be anything that's less than 100 by 20, and then obviously over the 25 by 3. So those are the two categories. So they're saying there's 31,000 missing addresses that were not on the broadband data fabric. So that fabric, that's something that the FCC contracted out to a company called CostQuest to create this broadband fabric. And basically what it is, it's an attempt to identify every single broadband serviceable location in the United States. That would be every home, every business, every structure really on a property. So it could be a home and then other structures that are on a property that need to be identified very precisely as to where they are. And then that broadband fabric was put together, and then a process was put forward where internet service providers then had to upload into that fabric basically their serviceable locations. So you have areas that are supposed to have broadband that are in the fabric. That was what's supposed to be in the fabric. Then you have overlaid on top of that the ISP data that shows whether an ISP serves that particular location, and then they also needed to provide some other information like the maximum advertised download and upload speed, whether the latency is less than 100 milliseconds, what type of service it is it fiber, wireless, cable, that kind of thing. So all of that is now in process, and there was a bulk challenge process once the fabric, once the ISP, even before the ISPs maybe finished their data, the states and others were able to challenge the fabric data as far as not whether service was there, but whether there should be service there. So New York submitted over 31,000 addresses. You see here, challenge represents crucial step in obtaining federal funding and identifying coverage gaps. Governor Hochul today announced that New York's Connect All has submitted over 31,000 addresses from across the state to the FCC under the Broadband Data Collection Challenge Process. The FCC, or the federal challenge process, which allows states to propose changes or updates to the FCC's broadband maps. And really, it's not so much the broadband maps at this point, it is the broadband fabric. So the maps are basically going to be displaying the fabric with the service provider information on top of it. And this helps to better locate areas that are unserved or underserved by broadband. In doing so, these proposed changes inform federal funding decisions regarding broadband access to help and ensure that high-speed internet is available at every address in the country. The Commerce Department is expected to begin dispersing broadband funding from the IIJA to states and territories in late 2023 based largely on the proportion of unserved and underserved homes and businesses in each state, using maps created by the FCC. So that's true. So actually the date that the NTIA announced yesterday, I did a kind of a breaking news broadcast yesterday because the FCC came out and said that the first iteration of the map, which they're now calling preliminary, almost like beta, is going to come out a week from today. So next Friday, November 18th, the FCC is going to put out their map, and that map is going to be something that can be challenged by consumers. Consumers can go up and look at their address and see whether the service that it says they're supposed to have is actually available. Also, there can be bulk challenges from entities like states and tribal governments that can challenge that data as well. So that comes out on November 18th. And based on that, the NTIA then came out and said, okay, well, those maps are coming out on the 18th. That's a preliminary map. And then the next thing that happens is once all these challenges are done with the map, then a new broadband fabric will be put out that will encompass those challenges. And I'm assuming that would be challenges that have been verified, confirmed, which is going to be a difficult process, but they'll confirm those challenges. And then at that point, the new fabric will be out and ISPs will be updating their data into that new fabric. And then around April, May or so is probably when the next broadband map will come out, and that will be the map that the NTIA then will say, okay, we're putting a stake in the ground, and this is where we have decided, the FCC and the NTIA have decided that all of the unserved and underserved locations are. So that will then be all the unserved and underserved locations, and then the bulk of the money from the BEAD program, that's Broadband Equity Access and Deployment, that's part of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. There's $42.45 billion in there, and the bulk of that money will be allocated based on the percentage of unserved locations that a state has compared to the rest of the country. So each state will get $100 million, and then that'll either be it for the really small states that have very few unserved areas, to larger states and states with lots of unserved areas where they could get much more than that based on, again, that calculation. So those are the next steps. So this challenge was made possible due to New York's first of its kind interactive broadband map launched earlier this year, which contains detailed information of the state's broadband infrastructure down to the street level. And it is a cool map. Like I say, when it first came out, and I'll link to that at the end of this if you want to see a full, I'm going to show the map here in a minute, but if you want to see a full demo of it that I went through, I did that when that first came out. The 31,798 records in the state's challenge are all among the 138,598 addresses identified as unserved or underserved by their Department of Public Service Broadband Assessment Program, and include evidence that they meet the FCC's definition for inclusion in the federal map. So that's part of the challenge process that they had to do. They had to go through certain specific ways that they would upload this data and then confirm that it, identify what the challenge is and confirm all of those things. And it's interesting, it's not unexpected that all of these records are addresses that are considered unserved and underserved, because generally that's where you have the issues where you've got missing data, because it's not that hard to identify a lot of times areas that already have broadband because they tend to be, well, I'll put it another way. The areas that don't tend to have broadband are going to be in rural areas where the data is kind of sporadic. There's not a lot of homes really close to each other. It's not like you have a series of neighborhoods where you've got all houses that are, you can, throw a rock with no problem and hit your neighbor's house where, out in rural areas, that's hard. So there's much fewer areas, and it's much harder to get a handle on who needs broadband, which structures need broadband in those areas. So that's not surprising. Let's see if there's anything else in here. The initial map produced by the New York Broadband Assessment Program was the result of months of field assessments conducted by the Public Service Commission in the state's most remote areas, covering more than 80,000 miles. In order to collect accurate data, the Commission collaborated with 60 internet service providers and surveyed tens of thousands of New York consumers. So that's how they got the data for the map. Prior to the creation of the New York's Broadband Assessment Program, New York, like most states, relied in part on federal data that only required broadband providers to deliver service to one address in a census block to designate the entire area as served. And I don't, kind of the way that's put is that the service provider, maybe they did this, I don't know, that the service provider would say, okay, here's a census block, let's just connect up these two homes there, then we can say the whole area is served. I don't think there was a lot of that intentionally going on. That doesn't make any sense. I suppose there could be a situation where somebody might say, hey, you know what, if we extend our network another mile, we can connect this home and that whole area is considered served. But in general, it's because you've got census blocks and you've got particular service areas that service providers have, and they might serve, if a census block's got 30, 50 homes in it, they might serve maybe 10 homes on a street, and then you've got a gap, and then the rest of those homes are not served. But with the old FCC data, that whole census block was considered served. So that's the problem we had, and that's what these granular address-based maps, like New York, and then also the new FCC map, that's what that's going to resolve. By collecting address-level data, New York is able to depict what locations are served, underserved, and served, underserved, and unserved in a more granular way, which will aid in allocating state and federal funding. State and federal funding, yes. National funding, as far as the percentage that New York will get, again, that will be based strictly on the FCC maps, not on the New York map. But the New York map helps them figure out where the FCC map is wrong and to do this challenge. Without this challenge, and unless the FCC updates its map, which they will be doing, it will not be possible for the FCC to recognize those locations in New York as lacking broadband service, and the state would miss out on much needed funding. Yeah, so New York is doing this challenge. There may have been some others that were challenging. It could be, well, service providers would only challenge probably if they were serving an area and it said they weren't. But again, consumers will be able to challenge come November 18th when the FCC map comes out. If somebody was living in an area, they could look at the map and say, this says we're served and we're not. Or they could look at an area and say, you know what, I'm not on the map. You know, because if there's missing locations, that means that home is not on the map. So you could search for your address in the broadband map and it won't come up. So there's different kinds of challenges that will be happening here. So that's that press release from New York. And again, I also want to look at this story. So this is kind of a follow-up here in Fierce Telecom. CostQuest, which is the contractor that the FCC got to create the broadband fabric. And that was a very, very difficult thing to do. So again, trying to identify every single location in the United States, every structure that should have broadband. That was CostQuest's job, and they created the fabric. So CostQuest says that the New York locations missing from the FCC broadband map are a fraction of the total count. And of course, with 31,000 addresses out of however many people live in New York, it is a fraction. New York State Broadband Office recently made headlines when it revealed it found more than 31,000 locations missing from the fabric. But while that figure might seem like a lot, CostQuest told Fierce that number amounts to less than 1% of the state's total location count. So yeah, that's not surprising. CostQuest VP Mike Wilson said the company couldn't address whether the FCC would accept or reject New York's challenge. So he hasn't looked at that yet, and the FCC will look at that and work with CostQuest. So he's not addressing that, but he noted that the locations it identified represented about 0.66% of the total of more than 4.7 million locations it counted in the state for the first version of the fabric. Wilson explained this figure falls in line with what we would expect as a potential error rate for the initial fabric. He added version 2 and future versions of the fabric will bring continual improvements. Some of the improvements will come from our own efforts related to updated data, imagery, and processes, and some will come from the participation of states and other parties in the challenge process established by the FCC, which is what New York is taking advantage of here. So they're doing that challenge. So let's look at the New York map. So this is a good map because what you're seeing here, let me make this bigger for all of us. So what you're seeing here is all of these dots represent a location that has broadband. So this is Farmingdale, New York, on Long Island. So you can see that, again, an area like this that's suburban, lots of homes all clustered together. So this is an area where service providers, I'm sure they have multiple broadband service providers in this area that are providing broadband at high speeds because there are lots of customers all banded together. So it's not nearly as expensive as it would be to serve, let's say, a rural area because you've got house to house to house, neighbors right on top of each other. So that's an example of what this area looks like. And on this map, if you zoom out, where's my zoom out? Here it is. So if you zoom out, the way the map works is you'll start to see that it consolidates. These are individual homes now. And then I think that's still showing me an individual home count or look. And then as I go out, I start to see it's going to change to, and hopefully this will work because this laptop was downloading an update. It was getting very slow. So now you start to see groups of homes. It kind of puts it on the map that way. So you can see here it's 88, 89, 88, 92, 105. So these are just kind of showing you groups of homes. And you see the colors here. The colors are indicating, I think it's right there. Yeah, so blue, this color blue that we're looking at is served. So these are people that are over 100 by 20. Then you've got underserved. Again, that's, let's say, over 25 by 3, but under 100 by 20. And then you've got unserved, which would be less than 25 by 3. So we don't see any orange on here. And that's, again, not too surprising considering this part of New York. So I can go out further and the same thing happens. I just get bigger clusters showing me bigger clusters of homes and numbers go out even further. Eventually it's just going to change to the, and there's a cluster of yellow. I saw it a minute ago. There's a few yellows in there. Not sure what that was. And as I go out, now you see I'm getting to a state level. So you see I'm actually, again, I was looking at Long Island, specifically Farmingdale and that area. And you see the whole state here. And there's not much, you can't see much difference at a statewide level color-wise. I noticed there were some areas that, some counties that were more a lighter color blue, but at this level, there are going to be a good number of served people and unserved people, so you can't color the whole county yellow or gray or orange. So it's a lighter color, so it might tell you that you can drill in there and see other things. And I did drill in there to an area, one of these areas here. So this is, let me move something out of my way that I can see this whole thing. So this is an area in more central New York, and you can see the difference. So this, here's a home, here's a home. This is orange, this is unserved. This one's kind of a lighter color. Let's see, that's probably, what was that color again? Be the legend. So that's underserved. Okay, so this light color is underserved, that's unserved. I don't see any served so far here. So these are areas that are, this is less than 100 by 20, but over 25 by 3. This is less than 25 by 3. And you can see there's not much on this map. And, a satellite view gives you a good indicator of what this area looks like. So I'm going to zoom out just a little bit here. So you can see, again, you've got underserved, and here's another home over here, underserved. There's not a lot of customers in this area compared to what we're looking at in Farmingdale there. And then you see this here. This is a good example of a broadcast I did not long ago about the long driveway problem. So this particular case, this house is unserved, but you'll see a lot of places around the country where this might be served. This could be a house that has fiber running right down the road here, and this house is connected, and there's a house over here that's connected, but then you've got this long driveway, and you might have a home out here that's unserved because a lot of times these franchisees that, the incumbent provider, whoever it is, AT&T, Comcast, or whoever, maybe even a local provider, there's a franchise that says they have to, if they're going to have a franchise in that area, they have to deliver service if the home is within, let's say, 300 feet of the road. But you can see an area like this might be well over 300 feet. And this house could be sitting out here in this little island being unserved. And that's one of the issues that we have. But here you can see in this particular area, it's just all unserved generally because of, here's another home, just generally where these folks are. You've got a lot that's just not showing up. And then we've got there were a couple of things that were interesting on this map. See if I can find them when I was looking at it before. So what's out here? So, these are some areas out here. Are these really homes? I don't know. Are these really broadband serviceable locations? Maybe so. They're showing as unserved, but you don't even see any roads out here. So I'm not sure. Here's a yellow dot. Here's a yellow dot. So one of the things I question is, New York's put their map together, but is it completely accurate? It may be. But as I was looking on here, I did notice that there were some areas where it looked like, a couple places where it looked like there should be service. Where was it? Was it here? Yeah, here's a place, for example. So here, I've got an orange dot in the middle of the woods, but I don't have a dot here on the structure. I do have a dot here on this structure. So this to me looks like somebody that should have broadband. Now maybe this is what they are looking at there, and they're just saying that's the spot, and they did not do a good job of pinpointing it. But then we've got these two. So these look like locations that I don't see any little orange dot on there or any dot at all saying whether this is served or unserved. So this looks definitely like a home here. Again, kind of a long driveway, not too long. Here's another one. That looks like a home. I would think so. I suppose it's possible that these are all on the same property, and this is the main home. I don't know. But anyway, in any event, we don't know for sure. I don't know if there was any challenged process done with the New York map. Maybe there was. I don't know how detailed that was, but it's certainly possible that the New York map is not exactly correct either. So I do see areas where it looks, again, like a dot's in the middle of an area there where there's no structure. maybe there is, I don't know, but I saw one here. That's a dot right there. So is there supposed to be broadband there? Now on the broadband fabric, the way they did the broadband fabric is on that fabric, if there was a structure, they looked at satellite imagery, they looked at all kinds of things. They look at tax records, they looked at lots of data sources to be able to determine where there's a potential customer. They looked at satellite imagery to determine the structures that are on the land. They kind of had a lot of artificial intelligence to look at roofs and what they look like to determine, does this look like a place that should have broadband? And then they put the dot right on the structure. So that determines the location ID. They were not actually addresses that were in the fabric. They were location IDs that corresponded with an address. But as service providers uploaded their data, they needed to be doing it by location ID that was in the fabric. So again, you can see there's nothing here for whatever this structure is. But if on the fabric, I don't know if this particular location is on the fabric or not, but it does not appear to be on the New York map, unless, again, these two are somehow associated with each other. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. Again, they particularly said, like the CostQuest representative said, we don't know what the outcome of the challenge is going to be, but it's not unexpected that you'd have that number of addresses that would be in error or either not available, because again, this was the first shot at getting this done. And this whole challenge process that's already taken place, there's the challenge process that took place in September on the broadband fabric. There's the broadband map challenge process that will be taking place after November 18th when that's made available. So that will make all of this better. So again, the next shot that they get at this is going to be early in January. The next fabric is going to be created using these bulk challenges on the fabric, as well as challenges from consumers on broadband locations and broadband service. Do they really get the broadband service that people are expecting there? So let's see. Chris says, do you know if there is a publicly available list of these 31,000 addresses that New York is challenging? There's not, and I'd be surprised if there was. I don't think that would be made public. And again, it's not that. There's a lot of the fabric data is held pretty close to the vest, so nobody really, unless you are an eligible entity or somebody that can challenge the fabric, you don't even know what's on the fabric. And I don't think that New York has made this data available, although, again, in a week from now, everybody will have access to the most current FCC broadband map, the new one that's generated based on this initial fabric, and then we can all look at that. But no, I don't believe that's the case. And it's really interesting that they're now calling that first map preliminary, as if it's, because I think they realized originally everybody was hoping the broadband map would come out, and then we'd know who would get the funds, but then the NTIA came out and said, we realized based on the number of people that are saying that the fabric is really not that accurate, that we can't go based on that first map. So this first map is now being called preliminary. And then they're calling the one that comes out, let's say in spring of next year, they're calling that the final map, although it's not going to be final in the sense that this map is always going to be changing as new areas are added, that kind of thing. But the final map, as far as determination of who's unserved and underserved for the BEAD funds, comes out then. So sounds good. Thanks. Yeah, so you're welcome. Thanks for watching. And yeah, I do appreciate everybody for watching. Thanks a lot. And if this was helpful or interesting, if you would give me a thumbs up on the video. If you're not subscribed, click subscribe, click the bell, and you'll be notified when I'm live. And don't forget to check out our website and see everything that we can do, depending on who you are. If you're a broadband office, it could be a broadband office. If so, reach out to us. We've been helping internet service providers get in the business literally since 1995. Okay, it wasn't broadband back then, it was dial-up, right? But we've been doing it that long. We started out as a dial-up operator ourselves back in or prior to that, like 92, 93, right when the web was coming out. A bulletin board service, even prior to that, we were a bulletin board service. I wasn't there then, but I did join in 95, so I've been around a long time. So we started out as an ISP and very quickly shifted to helping others get in the internet business. Again, starting with dial-up and then moving to, and that could be anybody could do dial-up because you didn't own the last mile, right? That was all phone company infrastructure. You just needed modems and phone lines, right? And then DSL came out. We helped telephone companies get into that. We helped cable companies get in the broadband business. We helped municipalities and electric utilities get in the business. So we've been doing that for 25 years. So if you're a broadband office, there's a lot of ways we can help in your community. If you are looking, as you look to sub-grant money, people that might need the kind of services that we can provide, look us up. If you're an internet service provider, an existing one, we have services for you as well. So check us out, and you'll find out that there's a lot we can do for you. Again, thanks for joining us for this broadband deployment news on Friday. I will see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.